Here is my voice clear? Oh, and
Yes,
also,
you're
can you
audible.
guys see me?
Yes, you're audible and clear.
Okay. Begin my speech. Oh wait, hold on. I haven't opened my timer. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. In an ever-prevalent world where the world is dying by the second, we believe that as the European Union should be the first country to should be the first. Sorry, let me start over. In the state of the world we're in, the world is dying faster than ever, and no one is realizing it. And that's why we, as the affirmative side, believe that the European Parliament should approve the Green Revolution proposal, not only to bring environmental impacts for the EU and the world, but also for the benefit of everyone inside of it. So before I begin my speech, I will bring two things in my speech. First of all, is the urgency on why we should do on why the European Parliament should approve this, and two, and how this reduces emission on a large scale. But before that, I'd like to characterize the European Union. European Parliament, alongside the European Union, is one of the biggest international alliances and cooperations of the world, spanning most countries in Europe, and it's their mission to help member countries to cooperate on economic, political, and security matters. I'd like to get into my first point, which is that the urgency of this the urgency of approving this movement. First of all, in the status quo of Europe, emissions are incredibly high for multiple reasons. First of all, multiple large manufacturers cause a lot of emissions in not only production, but importantly in shipping and movement of their products. Consistently through shipping and air travel, as ships and airplanes cause huge amounts of emission through their fuel usage and consumption. This is causal because in Europe, production lines are spread across multiple countries. The first line of production may be done in Germany and then move to France, and then the research and development goes into a different country, and so on and so forth. The production line makes it so that the development of products are spread across a different country, which means shipping and air travel fuels are high and cause a lot of emissions. The second reason as to why emissions are high in Europe is because of the high amount of large private vehicles. Private vehicles in Europe are more prevalent in most other areas of the world because Europe is connected by land mostly, and borders, because of the European Union, borders are very kind to each other and allow constant land travel. This means that private vehicles such as cars are prevalent, and most of the cars right now are still petrol diesel fuel, which makes it so that emissions are high. And the third reason why emissions are so high in the European Union is the high trade rates with external countries and other entities. The European Union and along Europe as a general is a very large hub for trading. It's because the economical line in Europe is controlled by European Union mostly. To pass through the trade line for external countries to pass the trade lines to Europe, they require tax to the European Parliament, which is why emission taxes are so high in Europe because. Sorry, emissions are so high in Europe because every country wants to trade with Europe. Every country has dealings with Europe because it's a very worthwhile investment. Europe is a very popular hub. So I've explained the urgency, the current state of the emissions of the European of Europe. So now I'd like to get into the second part of this, which is the effectivity of this, the mechanisms of this movement. First of all, imposing high tax on fuels for shipping and flight aviation. Fuel use for overseas shipping, as I said before, is very high, and by increasing the tax on overseas shipping, it'll lessen the emissions and incentive to actually use these fuel lines to cause emissions to Europe. Two, banning the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles by 2035. 23 years from 2022 is mechanized by gradually limiting the sale of petrol by lowering the amount of places that sell petrol, starting from the oversold areas where there's an abundance of them, to eventual removal of petrol sale in general, and push for electrical vehicles and public transportation by giving tax cut for those vehicles and discouraging diesel vehicles by raising the tax for those petrol fueled vehicles. By doing this gradually, it ensures that there's an incentive for people to move to non-diesel driven vehicles by 2035 and start using more eco-friendly electrical vehicles. And three, on the mechanisms of forcing companies or manufacturers outside the EU to pay for carbon emission tax as a requirement of selling produced goods to EU. So first of all, I've already explained how international companies should pay carbon emission tax to import and sell to EU because of the high trade rate. It's unlikely that people will stop trading with Europe. Why? Because Europe, as I said before, is a very big hub, and they can't risk losing out on trading with Europe. If you risk losing your goods, if you risk losing your trade lines with Europe, you risk a huge deficit in your trade, in your economics. And if you, as a company or another country, don't trade with Europe, don't sell your produce goods and export them to Europe, someone else will, another country will. This is an opportunity cost that you simply can't neglect. It's unlikely that these countries will avoid EU because it's still a huge investment and a contributor to the world economy. So how will it impact Europe? It'll cause a lot of sympathy as this cause is just. This cause protects not only the world but the constant state of the people. People every day are living in a constant state of breathing in toxic fumes and emissions, and it's very agreeable that most people would like a world where things are greener. And I'd like to bring up on how this will impact other countries. EU as Europe and the European Parliament will make this the first example, it will set in motion a snowball effect for other countries to follow. Europe is simply too big of a power to neglect its move, and setting it first will also impact other countries into following in their footsteps. This is why the EU should do it, as they are the policy makers, and people all over the world will listen, as it's non-neglectable. And two, it reduces emission on a larger scale, as it deters company to use the current forms of as I said before, of carbon emissions, and it pushes them to be more aware of the way they do it on carbon emissions, because companies care about money, companies care about profit, and the way they do it is inefficient because it causes a lot of carbon emissions, but they don't care because it's cheap. If we start making it expensive for them to be harmful to the environment, we can make it so that these companies will think twice about actually using proper more environmentally friendly ways of produce. And two, it seeks a way more environmentally friendly transportation. As of right now, electric cars are in their phase where it's getting everywhere and it's getting more prevalent than ever. And this is a prime time for us to start pushing for the reduction of emissions by pushing these electrical vehicles instead of the convenient petrol vehicles. And first, for these two reasons, we believe that this motion should stand. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now, to open the case of opposition, I welcome Leader of Ops. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, in our status quo right now, climate change is the biggest problem that we have faced right now in international society, right? Let's see, but there is a Paris Agreement, or right now there is a COP26 talking about the agreement between other countries to put to agree on some points on how that they will achieve, on how that they will tackle climate change in the end of the day, right? The government side of the house only tell you about how that the proposal of green revolution will eventually reduce the use of fuels, and in the end of the day will give a more better impact for the climate change, but they never tell you about how that there are the negative impacts of this green revolution proposal in the end of the day. I'm going to explain to you on the urgency of why we don't want to agree on this proposal and what we should do in the future. We believe that the only way on how to tackle the climate change is by doing collective actions by other countries and also international organizations or there are many actors, for example, UNEP or Greenpeace, that need to be involved in the end of the day to tackle the climate change itself. So we think that this green revolution proposal will not be going to be effective because it only have the small amount of actors that involved in this situation. Before moving into my speech, I'm going to give some rebuttals for the government side of the house. First rebuttals on about how did they tell you about the European Union as the biggest trading place and the biggest hub. That's why they don't want other countries to lose the cooperation. And they believe that because of the EU itself as the biggest hub, it will impact the other countries' economy. We say that as the opposition of the House, we believe that as the EU as the biggest trading place, that's why when they have, for example, they implement this higher tax of fuel, or they give a higher tax of, for example, the manufacturers or production, right? We believe that there is the moment when other countries will not cooperate anymore with the EU itself. Even if that the government side of the House tell you about how that because of the EU is the biggest hub of the trading, and also it will bring negative impacts for other countries. But we see in our score right now that other countries will not cooperate with the EU itself, and they're not gonna care about how that it will impact their countries, because there are more other countries that will cooperate with them with the more, for example, like more how did for example, the tax is not expensive as the EU. So we think that under other side of the House, that it will bring negative impact for the EU itself and will lose other countries that want to cooperate with them. Second rebuttals regarding to the effectivity, right? The government side of the House tell you about how that the higher fuel price will discourage the fuel vehicle, and how that they want to move to another eco-friendly vehicle. But we see the eco-friendly, for example, like the electricity car and so on and so forth, people that they need more price, or they are gonna be more expensive for the people itself. And we believe that not everyone in the EU countries itself are gonna they have the capability to afford these cars, ladies and gentlemen. So we think that it's not gonna be effective in the very first place. That's why we are going to give more solutions that are going to be more effective and also affordable for the people that I'm going to give you in my arguments. Going to my argument first is why it's harmful for European countries in our score right now. Let's see about how that imposing the high tax of, for example, fuels and aviation, then EU will sell the fuel on the higher price, and also how that the aviation has a higher tax on fuels, and then with the higher price of aviation itself, it will impact on the price of the airplane tickets, and for example, like fewer people will fly into the EU countries, or fewer country wants to cooperate with the EU countries because of the higher tax and also higher price that EU has already implemented before, right? This will affect the EU economic itself, ladies and gentlemen, because the higher price that they implement in the very first day, it will bring negative impacts for the cooperation between other countries, because for example, like the other countries that they cannot afford the price, and because of the higher price, so they tend to stop the cooperation with the EU itself, or for example, they are going to do a cooperation with other countries. So in the end of the day, the actors that will face the negative impact is the EU itself, ladies and gentlemen. And for example, like the policy of the proposal itself about how it will create a protectionism, or it will give EU protectionism, and also will isolate the EU itself from the other countries, right? And we don't want this to happen in the end of the day, because what we want is that we want to create a more cooperate with other countries. We want to create a more better relationship with other countries. So in the end of the day, we can tackle the climate change better in a better solution. Moving on the worst case scenario on happening if we are gonna fail this proposal, and in the end of the day, it will not only impact some countries in the EU, but also will impact the whole region, and we don't want to how it will impact the region, and it will impact the political stability and also economical stability. Now we don't want to lose all the stability that we already have right now, so that's why we think it is very harmful for the European countries. Moving on into my second argument on why it's not going to be effective. So first, that I'm going to explain to you more about how that we need the collective action coming from other countries, but we think that the collective action will also not going to be enough if there is no involvement coming from international organizations, or coming from, for example, like non-government international organizations, right? So we believe that what we want right now is that, for example, like an agreement that other countries can involve, that other countries can also voice their their opinions about their, for example, like let's say the condition in their country, on the capability of their countries to involve to create a more change in climate change itself, right? What we want is that we want to there's a better agreement coming from other countries, and also how that international organizations will involve by giving solutions, or for example, like assistance for those countries that cannot afford, or for those countries that don't have capability to solve the climate change problem. We think there is the role of international organizations will also be important in the situation right now. So how did this debate will going to be better in our side of the house? Because we already mentioned to you on how that collective action is very important to begin with. That's why by not agreeing on this proposal and creating a more better agreement, it will create a more better change in society, right? For example, like how that EU wants to, let's say that the EU will cooperate with other companies, for example, like Tesla, and then EU will build electric power, will build electric power public transportation for the people. So the people in EU countries will have the accessibility to afford, and they are not gonna use the vehicle with fuel power again, right? So we think that under that side of the house, we are very proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now to continue the case of government, I welcome DPM. Here.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hold on. Judges noticed that the proposal that the opposition has told you is very unlikely to happen, because it's very unrealistic, and it's such a radical change that it will be really hard to apply anyway. So what are the responses coming from our side to the opposition side? A few responses. Oh, that's quite a lot actually. One is on the idea of like when they their proposal, their mechanism on how to tackle the climate change is by taking collective actions, like making, I don't know, agreement in UNEP, and they say that green revolution have a small actors, and thus it won't create any like meaningful impact. And secondly, on the idea of cooperation of other countries, and thirdly on the idea of giving EU protectionism. So firstly, on the idea of tackling climate change, which one is the best? Is it our way of approving green revolution, or is it on the idea of taking collective actions, as in like UNEP kind of thing, right? So what the opposition needs to explain to you, and how and why, on how the collective actions in UNEP will be taken in their side, and why is it more effective than our side? Because we think it's not exclusive to UNEP in itself, because we as European European Parliament, we still can have both exist on our side. So because our goal is the same, right? So it's to reduce carbon neutrality and to minimize the chances of our world getting climate change, right? So I think that that's one. And secondly, we think that the UN is more complicated, as it involves a lot of countries that are very different in political climate and environmental conditions too. There are two manufacturers in that, and while the EU is more a controlled space where the countries are already regulated and cooperative because they have the same vision, right? So and also they have the same environmental landscape. That's why it is far easier to regulate EU as a whole. That's one. Secondly, on how on the idea of cooperation, they say that when EU is the biggest hub, it will biggest hub. That's why implementing the higher tax will make other countries will not cooperate. We think that this is a very lacking, characterization and explanation coming from the opposition side. I need to explain to you further about the cooperation thing, because we think that, yeah, of course, as an EU members, other countries will also cooperate with EU. We think that it's too high of an opportunity cost not to deal with EU if your country does not cooperate with. And we know that some other countries will, that this pushes the other countries to agree with the EU itself, because of the loss of not agreeing EU is way too high, because you probably, for example, you as a small country, like, I don't know, Lithuania, for example, like, it's such a small country, it needs protection from EU. So that's the idea of not agreeing with EU's decision on this idea is gonna be, very risky for them, because they're very easily to threaten, right? So, okay. So moving on to the third response is on the idea of, moving on. They propose to you that they want to, like, right now, moving to eco-friendly vehicle. We think that it's very hard to move. So this debate is gonna be like, which one is better, right? So if it is it green revolution or a more radical changes, like currently moving on to the eco-friendly transportation. We think that on this comparative, green revolution will not cost much, and it will not cost much, because if we want to make a radical change, such as like actually like right now making eco-friendly transportation, it will take a lot of years and years of research and fundings and stuff. But if we compare it to green revolution, we think that on this idea of having a more moderate policy will not cost much, and thus countries that are smaller can also participate in making the world a better place, right? So also by having like a few years to actually adapt to these kind of changes, people will actually more aware on what's happening, because if they say that aviation, the tickets will cost more because of because of taxes and stuff, we think that because of these things, people will get aware on what's really happening, and also these small countries can still save up for their own research on what is the best eco-friendly transportation alternative for them. So actually on both sides the goal is the same. It's just on our side it's more approachable and realistic compared to their side on actually having having to implement this kind of eco-friendly transportation alternative like right now, right? Because it's very unrealistic to have it on the spot right now. So what else does it impact to? We think that it also impacts to the economy of the country itself. If you don't spend as much money on the research of eco-friendly transportation that are that are probably still there are more they can still have many alternatives. They can spend it. These small countries can spend it on a more urgent things like healthcare, or making sure that all people in their for example, like bansos, like in our countries, we cannot just splurging our national budget on things, on researching things, because these small countries and underdeveloped countries have limited capitals. It's probably more feasible on huge countries like France and UK, but as a whole, as a European Union countries, we think that we have to look at these small countries first, and then to prioritize them and their own economical sustainability, and also their healthcare insurance, right? So thirdly, on the idea of progress, we think that on their side, because they never explain to you on how the UNEP collective action will actually taking place and how it will work, we think that we still, because our side is more really because our side is more detailed and perfectly elaborated, we can still make small progress because of this policy at the end of the day. Because of those reasons, we probably.
Thank you for the speech. Now to continue the case of opposition, I welcome the LO. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judges, when they say that in our side of the house, the change will be radical, we say that in their side of the house, their change is even more radical. Because in their side of the house, they're inflicting even more loss for the region itself as a whole, right? And this I will explain in my rebuttals. So first of all, they talk about how the EU is a large hub for trading, right? And that they say that if countries don't trade with the EU, then other countries will trade with EU, and the first countries will actually gain more loss, right? But it means that the EU itself, they heavily rely on export and import, right? Exactly when they say that when other countries don't trade with the EU, other countries would when countries don't trade with the EU, other countries will. That also applies to the EU itself, right? Where if they are to use protectionist policies, it means that they are actually closing themselves to the rest of the world, right? They are in then other countries can easily divert their products to other countries such as China, right? So you can actually have like bilateral or multilateral agreement with other countries that gives you more benefit, right? And has an exponentially higher market than the EU itself, right? And as they have said in the government side of the house, that the companies look for the most profit, then they will also choose to work with the countries that give them the least amount of expense burdens, right? Which is why it is more likely for these countries to actually leave trading with the EU and in the end of the day, trade with other countries that gives them the least amount of risk and the least amount of expenses, right? And they won't, at the end of the day, be scared take over the EU market because they see that the EU will actually bring them more economic loss than good, right? And second of all, they also talk about discouraging diesel vehicles and wanting everyone to change to electric vehicles, right? But they never actually told you how that is actually possible, right? Because as we know that electric vehicles itself, they are usually very expensive, right? And even if you gradually push people to actually convert to these electric vehicles, then only a small amount of people actually has the ability to acquire these vehicles because of their pricing in the first place, right? So at the end of the day, it won't actually be an effective way to actually achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, right? And when they say that when these policies are implemented in the EU, it will set an example for other countries, right? But they never told you how exactly other countries will be moved to implement the same thing, right? How then when they impose these rules that actually inflicts financial loss to other countries, the same countries will actually be moved to do the same thing, right? Like we have to understand that countries actually strive to survive, right? And in order to do so, they also need to sustain their economy. And if they were to implement the same thing as the EU, what they are doing is actually closing themselves to the market, right? And they won't actually gain any benefit from it, right? So moving on to my arguments. First of all, as my first speaker have already told you, if we impose taxes on fuels for shipping and aviation, it will impact the travel part of the EU, right? And so when the EU realize a lot, so the EU realize a lot of its income from travel, right? So if they increase the fuel for aviation, automatically the price for tickets will rise, and fewer people will be able to actually go to these countries, right? And automatically that will worsen the economy. And it not only impacts travel, but also impacts export and import, right? So when you put taxes on fuels for shipping, we have to understand first that EU is comprised of several countries, big and small, right? And these countries actually have only a small amount of people in the country, right? So they need this market from the outside to gain the incomes themselves, right? When the shipping taxes rise, shipping fee will also automatically rise, right? And not all companies will be able to sell their products overseas, and not all overseas companies in return are able to export to the EU with the price increase, right? What will happen is actually it will cause the income of the EU to actually weaken, right? And the currency itself to be weakened itself. The government side of the house also touches on how they want to sustain the economy of the small countries in the EU itself, right? But if we implement these protectionist policies, it will actually create devastation to their economy, where as we know, the EU is integrated and they have one currency, right? So the impact will be to the entirety of the region itself, and it will also impact the small countries itself, right? Second of all, if we force companies and manufacturers outside the EU to pay for carbon tax emissions, we have to understand first how the supply chain right now is very complex, right? And manufacturing of a certain good from the root to the final product doesn't happen in one place or in one company, right? And even the government side of the house also touches this, right? Then the government side of the house has to prove to you how then is the EU going to implement taxing. So are they going to charge the company that produce the final goods, or are they going to charge all of the companies that are involved, right? And if they do charge all of the companies, how are they going to do the check and balance if the taxes have been paid, and which bank are they going to use, and what are the parameter of them actually getting taxed, right? And how is this transaction going to be enforced? And we say that because of the complexity of climate change itself and carbon emission itself, it will be very hard for the EU to actually implement this, right? And it won't be sustainable at all at the end of the day if they are trying to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So what can we propose in our side of the house, right? As stated by my first speaker, what we want is to involve the world, not to participate, not only the EU, right? As she has already mentioned before, the EU can work together, for example, with companies such as Tesla to increase the amount of electric powered transportation that is in the country, right? And we can also impose a price increase of petrol and diesel in the country, in the EU countries itself, right? And this, we believe, will be more effective to, at the end of the day, achieve the carbon neutrality in the EU itself, right? Because it will actually motivate people to use public transport with the increased pricing of petrol and diesel in the EU itself. Then more people will convert to the public transport. And here, because they are working together with Tesla, then the public transport is electric powered, which means that they don't have a carbon emission, right? And it actually doesn't and it actually helps the EU itself to gain money from people using the public transportation, and it also helps other companies such as Tesla, as mentioned before, to actually gain money for helping the EU to provide these public transports, right? So it will actually be more mutually beneficial to both parties, both inside the EU and outside the EU, right? So at the end of the day, this will become a more sustainable way to actually decrease and achieve carbon neutrality in the EU by 2050, while also giving the least amount of risk of economic crisis to the region itself, right? And this is why we believe that in our side of the house, the condition itself, if we do not pass this proposal, it will be far more better and far more and is able to be more sustainable in the future. And this is why we believe that it will be better. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now I welcome Gov Whip here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, hold on. Okay, I am setting my timer. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, we're going to be the first team to give you realistic comparative and tells you how our world looks like, and we're going to do it using examples, and that will be enough. We will be telling you on how the opposition side actually has already failed to prove on how it's going to be feasible and how it's going to be all exclusive coming from their side of the house. Firstly, I'm gonna clear this debate first. I think this debate weighted on which one will damage our planet more, in which that we both agree on that we want our world to be greener, right? So that the first clash and the main clash goes to that. And also, I'm going to structure my speech around clash, so all rebuttals will be integrated throughout. Firstly, let's talk about which one will damage our planet. Well, let's talk about it. Why is it really important in the first place? Because as like Greta Thunberg has already said, well, there's no plan B, right? There's no planet B, sorry. And also climate change is really impacting so many livelihoods and making our nature imbalanced. So the debate goes to which one will lessen the damage that happens. Well, firstly, we really is confused on what kind of mechanism that it's coming from the opposition side, because they always say about collective actions and all of that kind of mechanism, but it is really unclear on how they will make the collective action. They make examples such as the Paris Agreement, but we think that it's not going to happen. Here's the thing. Oh, okay, not only the Paris Agreement, but also by involving UNEP. Well, here's the thing. Firstly, the UN is more complicated as it involves too many countries that have very different political perspective and also political climate and also environmental conditions. Means that there are so many X factors, while the EU is more controlled space where the countries are already regulated and cooperative. That's how making the regulation around the EU, it's going to be more beneficial. And also secondly, examples such as the Paris Agreement is such a bad example because of why? Because a lot of the countries never ratified their agreement in the Paris Agreement in the first place. And also the USA even withdrew their signature, and also plenty of countries just failed to meet its commitments made in the Paris Agreement. We already see how this kind of collective agreement, it's not going to happen. And if it happens, the opposition side should have been telling you on how it's going to be feasible, how it's going to be likely to happen from their first speaker. But we have already seen that there's no proof whatsoever to make their argument valid. Hence, their argument can be discredited. So also, here's the thing, panels. What will happen by you are making collective actions is that it will take so many X factors, right? There are so many people that are involved. So what will happen is that it will delay the change. And secondly, the policies will also be delayed, in which that they will achieve their goal maybe in their best case scenario, but they will achieve it slower. But so how it's going to work in our side of the house, how it's going to be faster in our side of the house? We have already told you how the EU has more similar political climate. They have already they are basically pretty similar to one and each other. Means that these kind of policies are the one that it's going to be more beneficial and it's likely to be ratified. And also the EU itself, they have really high GDP, means that even if it's gonna affect the price, even if it's gonna affect the market, we think that they have enough capital in which that their countries will still live in prosperity. We also think by making the IU to regulate this regulation in the first place is going to be more strategic. And why is that? Because the EU, as I've already said, they are the countries that are far in the front, means that they're like first world countries, meaning the countries outside EU is actually adapting to the market that the EU sets in the first place. We think that this is kind of setting somewhat a role model to the rest of the world by seeing EU making a concrete action, not only agreements, but actually taking this kind of action that has to be implemented because there are regulations that are bound to them. We think that it's gonna be gonna be likely to achieve the goal. Because why? Because the countries have the obligation to do the policies that they have already signed into, and then we think that it's gonna be more likely for us to also accelerate these kind of changes that it's gonna be happening in the EU, and the rest of the world will adapt. And then secondly, the opposition side also talks a lot about changing to electric vehicle, how it's not going to be feasible in our side of the house, how it's really expensive, and then how it increased tax on shipping and aviation fuel, and etc. And here's the thing, panels. Firstly, we have already told you on how it will gradually change, and what we mean by it is that the world will adapt eventually. The demand will be higher, it will be more affordable at the end of the day, because there are so many demand that are needed, means that there are more supply that are being produced. And that's like that is basically on how our mechanism it's going to be more feasible. It's because at the end of the day it's going to be more affordable. Hence their assertion on how it's not feasible coming from negative side cannot be credited because it's not valid in the first place. They have never told you on how it's not going to be happening in our of the house, but actually it is more likely to happen in the first place. And secondly, they also talk about how they want to work with Tesla and then they want to involve the world and etc. Well, actually, we say that it's not exclusive. We will also be changing to the electric vehicle, and also the EU will agree to those policies, meaning that the concrete actions it's gonna be applied to most countries and also most people in the world. We think that it gravitates more, and also the magnitude of impact in which that people that are affected by our regulation, it's gonna be more people that are affected. Hence the change. It's not gonna be very drastic, and then people will adapt eventually. And then secondly, they say that the supply chain is very complex and it's really hard for EU to implement this because EU is like one of the most leading manufacturer in the world. Well, the opposition side also argues that they will make this kind of collective agreement in which that we think that it's going to be worse in EU because the world supply chain is very complex, and then we are talking about how it's going to be impacted for the world means that it's really hard for you to because the bureaucracy and also the supply chain is very, very complicated. Hence the agreement and also the regulations coming from your side, it's not going to be feasible, and also at the end of the day it's going to be ruining the progress that we have right now because of the complication on which the countries cannot agree to each other. So what actually we have proven to you in this debate? Firstly, we have already told you how by making this mechanization and also this regulation towards the IU, it's going to be more impactful because it's not really that risky. Firstly, and then secondly, it's going to be gradual changes in which that eventually people will adapt. And then thirdly, we have already told you on how basically the mechanism coming from their side, it's cannot be credited at all because they have never told you on how the mechanism will work. And secondly, they actually kind of neglected how the magnitude of impact is going to be worse in their of the house because they are involving the whole world, which we have already shown you also how the Paris Agreement has failed. They have never proven to you how their mechanism will not fail. Hence, from all of these reasons, we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the speech. Now I welcome opposition whip. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, good day, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as the third speaker of the opposition house, firstly, I will bring the class and I'm gonna make clear about the differentiation on both houses generally. On this debate, we could say that the goal of both houses, the opposition and government, is similar, in which we want to reach the carbon neutrality and tackle the carbon footprint. What we debated is whether or not that the European Union should approve the Green Revolution proposal. Also, what should be considered on this debate is which side brings more effectivity towards our goal, and those who gives minimum loss, those who give sustainability, and those who gives overall goods to most sectors in the countries. Now, by the stance from the government side of the house, they said that the European Union should approve the Green Revolution proposal, while we, the opposition, believe that the EU should not. And the core argument of the government is that to ban and tax the fuels for shipping, aviation, the vehicles that powered by diesel, and forcing the manufacturers to pay taxes. in EU-based system is the best to tackle the carbon footprint and thus better to reach the carbon neutrality that the government side of the House said. While us, the opposition, we believe that the EU should not approve the proposal because we see and we consider the negative effect of this proposal, and which range from the economic sectors, the sustainability itself, the social sides, and the effectivity. Okay, so now move from the past arguments. The government side of the House didn't really explain or elaborate about the mechanism of their own argument. They will say that it is better to ban petrol and diesel vehicles or to tax on manufacturers and fuels for shipping and aviation. But it could not be that easy because by what my previous speakers, the first and the second speakers already said, that kind of banning is give snowball effects to many actors, and it is too Eurocentric. For example, the banning on petrol or vehicles will affect the people on the EU itself, because not everyone on every country in the EU could afford the alternative energy. In this case, is the solar energy or electric car for transport and etc. And even if there's a public transport, there could not be all the people to use it because of different reasons, such as the way to their purpose is different than the public transportation and other reasons. So by this kind of argument, it doesn't really solve or reach the goal of their own arguments, and also ironically will give more problems to the actors in this debate. And from what I've said before, it's too Eurocentric. In reality, the EU is not consist by many countries or most countries in the world, and thus by having the carbon neutrality in their own region, it cannot really affect the world. Also, if you say that by having coalition with countries is unrealistic, we think that it's more unrealistic to be rely on the EU alone to make change in this climate problem. We say that the other countries could follow EU, but how strong is the impression of EU, to be precise? And why would the other countries would obey EU if it is not really beneficial for them? So our argument is actually more realistic because by joining coalition, they are tied by some law or agreement, and of course, it is beneficial for them as they can get help or money for their own development, especially on public transportation, while they still obey the agreement. And thus, by having coalition with countries, we could reach our goal to reach the carbon neutrality, and not only in Europe region, but in the other region as well. And also, how could you say that by having exclusively in Europe only, how can you assure that the other countries will obey the EU while they in reality do not really care about the climate problem in their own region? So what we propose is better because we make a mechanism to for the countries to make a coalition. Okay, and from the reality itself, there's already good example for coalition of countries in terms of climate change problem that called COP26. In this coalition, the countries make an agreement in which they want to tackle the climate problem, not only in their own region, but in their shared region as well. And so that's why our house is provide more plausible and realistic arguments towards this motion, and that's why our arguments is more provide the good things and beneficial for our own goal, and thus our side of house reach our goal and give more benefit towards the actors and minimum loss towards the countries. That's all from the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the speech. Now I welcome opposition reply. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to begin my reply speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, both government side of the House and also opposition side of the House agree on one point, that there is a WeChat that can prove to you on how that our solution gonna solve the problem, which is how that we want to reach carbon neutrality and also how we want to tackle the climate change, right? Government side of the House, I'm going to begin to speech about my reply speech on one class, which is the effectivity on how that we want to tackle the climate change problem. First, the government side of the House tell you on how that they want to create a change in society. For example, like they want they believe that by proposing this proposal will enough to solve the problem, because they say to you on how that the EU is as the biggest regional organizations with countries, and also that how that other countries will also follow what the EU do. For example, when they try to neutral the carbon neutrality, right? But we say that to you about how that the EU itself is not so powerful enough that they have the capability to influence other countries, for example, the small countries, to also do what the EU do in the form of solving the climate change problem, right? That's why the opposition side of the House already proven to you on how that our solution is gonna be better. For example, we already proposed to you on how we want to collective actions coming from the other countries, for example, small countries or international organizations and also communities that are focusing on these climate change problems, because we think that the collective actions is going to be better to solve the climate change problem itself, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see about, and the previous speaker before on the opposition side of the House already mentioned to you on the importance of the collective actions, and also how that we will listen on the opinions coming from the other states and also coming from the international organization, which it will create a more better change in our side of the House, right? Even if that government side of the House already tell you and mentioned on how that this is going to be effective, and it will take a long time, because they believe when they are will approve this proposal, in the end of the day it will be more effective, because EU is the European countries are having the same political views. But we think that even if that we have to a long time to proceed this, but we think it's very okay in the end of the day, and we think it's still better in our side of the House, because we believe that on how that we want to tackle the climate change problem it's not going to be effective, and it's not going to be achieved in the end of the day if we are only focusing on our regional, for example, like EU only focusing on how that they want to improve the European countries in the EU itself, right? So that's why we believe that what we are being proposing in this debate are much better than the government side of the House. Also, government side of the House also tell you on how that they are want to making regulations for the EU countries and so on and so forth, because they believe that it will be more easier on the side of the House. But we think that it's beneficial for the EU countries, because you have the same political values and it's very easy for you to implement these regulations. We think that it's not going to be more effective to solve the problem, because it, as we said before, it only focuses on the EU itself, right? We believe that on the only way on how that we want to solve this problem is by involving other states and involving other organizations, for example. And EU as the biggest regional organization, as the biggest trading hub, like the government has also said to you before, we think that's the EU responsibility to also involve other states and also create a better change in society by not being selfish by only doing this proposal only to solve the problem inside of the EU itself. Proud to oppose.
Thank you for the speech. Now to close the entire debate, I welcome government reply here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay. Okay, panels, let's just clear up the debate a little bit because it's getting very messy. Because the opposition side of the house never really explained to you on what are their stances and mechanism on this debate. What they only told you is that they will, take collective action on UNP and like using a more eco-friendly transportation and so forth, so on. But they never really explain to you on what are the collective action that they're talking about here, and secondly, what are the measurement of the successful collective measure and what they're talking here, right? So what our side has proven to you is that we have a more elaborated um, mechanism, that is to say that we want to approve and implement the green revolution, and also we have an exact measurement on when do we on when, and like how the exact measurement really works, because we have stated to you that we want to reach carbon neutrality, and by the time that by an exact time, that is 2050, right? So also in our mechanism we also have more specific specific kind of target measure, that is to ban, for example, that's to ban the sale of petrol and diesel driven vehicles by 2035. So what are the clashes here? So firstly, there is only one clash in this debate. That is which one will be more, or will achieve the goal better, right? So let's talk about, because actually, I myself, I cannot comprehend what you just did, because the opposition really is very unclear about their stances, whether they want to make a more radical policy by taking collective actions, or whether they do not want to make any any changes on the status quo. So let's just we will explain to you on either of their stances, right? So firstly, on the idea of if they actually want to implement a more radical policy by taking a collective action at the UN, we say to you that firstly, it's not exclusive on their side. We have proven to you that it's not exclusive to their side, and we still can do it on our side. And also, secondly, it's more complicated because UN imposed a lot of countries, and thirdly, by implementing this policy in the EU, we can create the indirect impact by pressuring other country association or organization to also push the similar kind of policy, so that at the end of the day we still can achieve our goal, right? So on this idea, we win this layer, and secondly, when also on the layer of maintaining economy, the opposition provides to you the idea of that small countries will not be able to have, to be able to maintain this company, that maintain the market of this company. But we have proven to you that these small countries will still able to maintain these kind of, company thing, marketing, because EU as a whole is they have abundant customers. They're one of the largest organization, as the opposition also have said to you. So we think that under of this thing, they will not company will not lose any market, and also these small countries will be benefited, because we can regulate their national budget spending a bit more efficiently on our side, and it can be used to a more urgent things such as healthcare and economical benefits. So under of these two layers of clashes, we win this debate, obviously.
Thank you for the speech and thank you for everyone for the debate. Now, please don't leave the breakout room, and judges, please move to this